Hello, it's me. I was going to do this as a written thing and I decided to not. I decided to speak it. Don't know if you've got, some people call it an inner muse. Just give myself a bit of fringe here. There's some sort of arising that makes you write or paint or dance or sing or draw or, you know, that sort of creative part of us. And I've definitely got something inside of me that pops up now and again that says, and it starts with a phrase, and the phrase that came to me, I've just been shopping, just avoided having a parking ticket because I stayed longer than I should. And the phrase that came to me was, I've forgotten it. See, so the phrase, I'll think about it. So the phrase that came was, that's so strange, I can't remember it. But it's something to do with the fact of my life falling apart in my 40s. And I think it was something like I spent most of my life just wandering around lost. That was it. I spent most of my 40s wandering around lost. I'm 63, I think, 64 this year. And it takes a long time sometimes to sort of process the history, doesn't it? You know, you go back and, well, I do, go back and sort of reflect on. So my 40s were like that watershed that I think probably the phrase life begins at 40 probably stems from. That all of a sudden, for many of us, I don't know if I'm alone in this, I'm probably not, suddenly I have this growing realisation and of what you've created in your life so far. And this realisation of this question that comes, and is this what life's all about? And then you look back on the first 40 years and you think, and I began to see, I'll talk about me, I began to see that I'd just been following a programme. That actually was a programme running, that I was just living in somebody else's, society's, culturally, family belief system furrow, that really was one that I just plopped in and thought, oh, this is the way you live life. And so as a result of a lot of things in my 40s, late 30s, I think the catalyst was my mother dying when I was 35. And then my marriage slowly falling apart from that point until my early 40s. And so leaving my marriage, and then my children choosing to slowly leave my life. And other things that happened, my dad dying, that was a real sort of like knee-jerk moment. And then this growing realisation that actually I was sort of living a life that I hadn't consciously, actively chosen. I'm very grateful that I had all of that experience, and yet I can see that I was just following some sort of belief system or method or the culturally accepted way of living your life. And so then I started to live on my own. I had a boyfriend who committed suicide. There was all sorts of drama going on in my 40s, you know, and it ended up finally when I was 49 with my lower back going and having a disc and explosion in my lower back and having to have surgery. And then slowly through my 50s, even in my 40s, I was exploring that question of who am I and how do I want to live my life and what is my purpose and why are we here, and all those big, massive existential questions that some of us have a look at and go, ooh, that looks scary. And some of us choose not to poke around in that anymore. We just think, nope, we'll shut the door on that one. I'll just continue living like this because it's easier. And by golly gosh, at certain times it did look a lot easier just to follow the process, follow the norm, follow the structure that the cultures of what we live in. And I know many people who have had to pull themselves out of that programmed conditioning that's, you know, and it's not easy, is it? You know, it's like we get to see this system that we've been just sort of fallen into, and then you have to pull yourself out of it. And there's so much loss with that, you know. I lost so much about myself, but I also lost lots of connections with other people. You know, people would think, she's gone a bit nutty, she's gone a bit crazy, oh, she's one of those hippies, new ager, you know, all that sort of labelling that you get. If you've walked this path, you know, if you've walked what I would call personal awakening, spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it, some sort of awakening, that a really good book I read. It's funny as well, I tend to read books after the experience, before it. That's not strictly true, but a lot of the time I think, oh yeah, what I'd have given to read this. I wished I'd got a book to help, you know, that I read a book, you know, how to do a good divorce. You know, that would have been so useful to read a book like that. Why did I not think of reading that? And then afterwards it plops it, oh my God. I didn't do that, I did that, I didn't do, oh, you know. So anyway, a really good book is a book called Falling Upwards by Richard Rohr. And I think he's an American religious person of some denomination, I'm not sure which, and yet he doesn't seem to write. It landed with me really well because he's not coming from that religious language, if you want to, for want of a better phrase. So I found that to be a really good book that brought some understanding. It seems to me that most humans, we go through this first phase of our life collecting the societal norms, the cultural norms, the family norms, and then at some point we another thought came in there that I'll have to just weave into this next bit, that we suddenly wake up, and for me it was in my 40s, and probably as a result of losing 2 parents and realising that I had this ache in me to be something, to do something. I don't know what that was. You know, I was at that probably doing in my 40s what maybe a lot of people do in their 20s, maybe not, you know, like finding out who we are and what we want to do with our lives. And then it seems to be this unpicking. So we have all, like, I had 40 odd years of like plastering all these belief systems and all these conditioned ways of being that worked in that environment. It worked for other people and it worked for the environment, but it wasn't working for me, and I didn't realise that. You know, depression, anxiety, all those sorts of things are indicator that, for me now, are indicators that I'm doing something that isn't working for me. And then of course we've been conditioned to put other people's needs before our own, and ours on the back burner, and you think, what about me? You know, what about my life? What about living in a way that feels healthy and right for me, as well as for you? You know, and that's the hard bit, you know, and I've had to grow into that as well. So through this sharing, you know, like, I'm sure people have an awakening, whatever that is to you. I think it's, for me, I thought, if I was to simplistically describe what an awakening is, it's kind of seeing that you're sort of living your life in a way that's more or less been imposed on you, but you've willingly gone along with it because you didn't know you could live your life in another way. I mean, I really do admire these people who say stuff that I'm going to go live on a boat and travel around the world, you know, and there are people like that who seem to come in with this, well, you know, the school system doesn't work, so for me, so I'm off. And I really admire people like that. And those of us who've been really heavily conditioned for so many years, the more, it's like the longer you're in something, it's like that frogs in water story, isn't it? That frogs don't realise they're being boiled alive if you put them in a pot. I don't know if anybody ever's done that experiment. I hope they haven't. But sometimes you can't see what you're in because you're in it. it's like you have to come out of it to see, actually, do I really want... And people seem to lose the fact that they feel they've got choice. It's, I had no choice. Well, there's always a choice, but there's consequences. You know, there's usually loss with choice. There's gain too, and at the same time, it's that loss thing that keeps us staying in the same old, same old. So it makes me, because adult-child estrangement is so prevalent now, so many, it seems to me, if you go on TikTok and various other places, and there's even people videoing the fact that they're suing their parents for being born, you know, and it's like going to the other extreme of something. They didn't choose to be born, you know, they've been put on the planet without their will, etc., etc., you know, and somebody has been successful, I think, in suing their parents for being born, and who am I to say, you know, that it just seems an easy way of getting money out of your parents, another lot of money out of your parents, if you ask me, but, you know, some people might feel that they've got a point, you know, I didn't ask to be born, I wanted to be born 600 years ago or 400 years on from now. Anyway, I'm being playful with all of that. But it does occur to me that this swell of young adults basically divorcing themselves from families, not just parents, but whole families, is part of this awakening process. That people are realising that the way that we're living our lives and the way that society is set up, and the structures and the institutions and the industries that have been set up, we're now seeing that they're sort of like imploding and unhealthy, and they might keep us safe and they might keep us in a rhythm of some sort, but actually we're getting more and more divorced from our own natural rhythms and losing connection with ourselves, let alone each other. You know, we become a bit automated. Somebody once said to me that the majority of people live in a box, go to work in a box, i.e. a car, go to a bigger box and stare at a box, a screen, and then get back into their box, their car, go back to their home box, and then switch on the goggle box and disappear into TV or screen or whatever. You know, and then she put on the end of it and end up like dying and being in a box, you know, and it sort of struck, you know, these little snippets that people say to you, they suddenly think, oh, well, I'm one of them, you know, get up, go to work, come back, you know, that treadmill that we get onto. And so many people talk about how hard it is, you know, and I've sort of moved out of that. I was thinking about the things that I used to talk about in the past and how it's changed. Now it's a different language, you know, I have my own business, I have my own company. Somebody just called, I really like that, it's a company, a service provision, you know, and my life is great, you know, I have it how I want it, and you know, even saying that brings a little bit of a should I be saying it like that? Is my life really, is it okay to say that my life is just how I want it? I mean, there's things around the edges that aren't exactly how I want it, and at the same time I feel like I'm moving towards having this, being the person that I really want to be, and also living the life that I really want to live, and the sense of fulfillment through that. And it just that's most of my 40s I was just wandering lost, you know, and dealing with absolutely loads of grief and loads of let go and loads of, how is this happening to me, you know, where is my beliefs, where are my structures, where is my safety, where is my known standing ground? A lot of people call that the dark night of the soul, when everything in your life becomes topsy-turvy and uncertain and feels very unsafe, and am I doing the right thing going on this venture, this quest? And, you know, there's stories around that, you know, the people going on vision quests and a rites of passage of being thrown out of the system and having to fend for yourself. And, you know, there's stories around that. And I've realised, you know, I've grown to realise that I like being with me. You know, I'm happy to be on my own. A lot of people struggle struggle to be on their own and feel lonely. Now, I do feel lonely occasionally, and that's different to being alone, you know, and because I realise, you know, we come in alone and we go out alone. We really have only got us. We sort of hang on to other people and have this sort of dependency on other people, and I'm just the same, you know, it's you know, I have that. And so yeah, where was I going? Or just so I think for me, me sharing this and explaining and repackaging it for myself, you know, my 40s were really difficult years. I was desperately lonely. I'd lived in a big family, I'd created another biggish family for myself, and then all of a sudden here I was on my own. And it's almost like, I feel like sometimes when you start this, I don't think anybody ever escapes having some sort of massive watershed in our lives where we get to question the meaning, ourselves, life itself and all of that. And it takes a lot of courage to deep dive into those dark places, those wells of unexplored imaginings and realities and all of that, to then slowly bubble back up to the surface and almost be reborn, you know, and having to carve out a new identity, new beliefs, new relationships. It's not for the faint-hearted, and I think, you know, it's a gift. It's a gift. I can see it as a gift now. I just thought it was hell on earth when I was going through it. And I think the hardest thing for me going through that was that I was worried that I'd lost me. I'd lost my essence, my sort of the Sunday that I knew and loved. You know, there was always a part of me that I've always loved, which is this joy part, this fun part, this playful, you know. I feel like I've got this sense of, I'm feeling very excited, you know, do you want to come and play with me? You know, I don't think I've ever lost that. Do you want to come and join in? Let's do something together. You know, that's been very much, a lot of my life's been around that. And I thought I'd lost that, and I thought that part of me would never come back, and it did. And it came back with bells and whistles on, it seems, to me. You know, there was a more grounded confidence in myself. And that's not to say that I don't sometimes feel a bit wobbly around the edges, because I do. And yet there's a certainty and an assuredness inside of myself, you know, that I know that I can manage, I can deal, that it'll pass, that whatever, you know, that this too shall pass sort of mantra. So if you're going through something where you feel like your whole world's breaking apart, there isn't the path's been walked by many, and yet your path is of your own creation, because that's what it's all about. In the past, we've been following other paths, so it makes sense to me that when you have the breakdown, you have the breaking open, you have to forge your own path. You get to choose your own path, you know, and I've chosen my own path. And it's hard for me, it's been hard doing that, because there's been like this conditioning that I still find pops up now and again, that this voice says, should you be doing that? You know, like, people won't like you doing that. That's not really going with what is expected, wanted, or even demanded sometimes. You know, it's a push to stay true to myself. And I think that's true for all of us. So if you're going through this, you know, take heart that no matter how deep you dive into those murky depths, I see it a bit like a well, and at the bottom there's a load of sludge that needs sifting through. And in that sludge, there's some wonderful jewels. That's been my experience, you know. I didn't recognise them at the time, but some part of me collected them and put them in a bag. And I brought them back up to the surface. And a few, whatever years, maybe there's some still in there that I've still got to pull out, some gems, and have a look at and see what was the gift in the most of those horrible experiences that I had. Because there is always a gift. It's just, it's not always apparent, and it can come out years later where you suddenly think, oh, that's why I chose for that to happen to me. Because the learning is intense, and it's absolutely amazing when you can wrap your head around it. So take heart if you are in the middle of a breakdown, break open. And I think it is true, you know, that, well, it was for me, that I noticed how hard it was in my breakdown. And there was little indicators along the way that it was coming, because I, you know, trot off to mental health stuff, and I was offered a bed in a as it was called in the time, in a mental hospital. I was offered a bed, and I thought, no, maybe not. But I was really poorly at times, emotionally unwell, because I was trying to shoehorn myself into a lifestyle that wasn't really suiting me. And I did it, but it sort of broke me. And then I broke open completely, you know, and I think it's true what I was going to say. I think when my experience was that when I really broke down, something happened inside where I had more empathy. I was less of a force field for pushy, domineering. You know, I broke out from that cast of being a bully and control freak and having to have life my way and through force rather than through consideration and communication and all that sort of thing. You know, now I could say, well, yeah, I understand that you don't really want me to do that, and this is really important for me. You know, how can we work it so that I get to do that and you're all right with that as well? Because that would be a win-win, you know, in terms of relationships. Instead, in the past, when somebody said, well, I don't want you to do that, I said, well, I'm bloody doing it anyway. And my elbows would come out and my chin would go forward, you know, and I'd use force energy to get what I wanted rather than this allowing it to, you know, I'd feel like I was being held back or restricted. So my heart opened. I got softer and I got stronger, and I got less hard and I got less shitty. Less defensive, less arguing, less looking for a fight, you know? Very masculine. I suppose you could use that masculine feminine thing. I was losing or letting go, that's probably better, letting go unconsciously all of this. It's really fascinating how it happened. Letting go of that masculine energy that was domineering and like just really single focus and like just on purpose, which is really useful. It's just how you apply it. And I was opening up to being more in my feminine, which is this like softer, more flowy, more water-like, you know. Instead of being a rock, was more water-like. And actually water has quite a lot of power to it because it erodes things over time. It flows and it yields, you know, it yields and yet it keeps flowing. And if you look at a river, it can carve huge change in its shape just by changing its flow a little bit, you know. So I became more feminine and less masculine driven, and yeah, I can still pull out my masculine when it's needed. So yeah. So my 40s were sort of like wandering around in the unknown, collecting things and letting things go, and confusion, and there was some pleasure in there, you know, the freedom that I struggled to allow myself to feel free, and I'd projected onto other people that I wasn't free. I can see all this in hindsight, you know, and I'd made myself feel contained by others. So now that I've worked through all of that and lost all of that, you know, I realised I had to lose it all, and that I had to be lost. And if I was going through that same process again, which is unlikely, you know, because that's what it was, I could have done that so differently. So that's some of the lessons that I've collected from that, you know, I can stop myself instead of leaping in and causing drama and chaos. And I think, how do I want to do this? How do I want to approach this? How do I want to implement this change that I want in my life? How do I speak to people? You know, I'm so much more considerate of others than I used to be. I just used to plough on regardless, you know. This is what I want and I'm going for it. I've been told that you just go for it in life, you know. I had no sort of like consideration of the effects of my choices and actions on other people. I just ploughed on regardless. I look back fondly at that person that I was at that time, and yeah. And I can still do that if I need to, you know, I can still plough on, and I am now aware of consideration of other people's stuff, and yeah. Anyway, that's been an interesting share and different to writing it out. And that line that came, I spent most of my 40s wandering around lost. That's a chapter of my life. Okay, I'll leave it there. I'll love you and leave you, and have a lovely day, and I'll speak to you again soon. Lots of love. Bye for now.